Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive using, well, a pretty unusual source, wouldn't you say?
Definitely unconventional. It's called The Ballad of the Magic Jar. Not your typical research paper, that's for sure. It's rhythmic, narrative.
Exactly. And it has this really clear, quite moving story about traditional healing in Sri Lanka.
And more than that, right? It gets into the power of natural medicine and then, crucially, this clash over intellectual property. Biopiracy, essentially.
Right. So our mission today is to unpack that story from the ballad. How does this traditional knowledge become, well, a global commodity, a contested one?
And it all revolves around one thing, a wooden jar
Hmm.
made from a specific plant, Kothala Himbutu.
A simple object, but it carries a huge weight in this story. The ballad treats it almost like a witness, doesn't it?
It really does. It's the physical anchor for this whole medicinal tradition, a tradition that, as we'll see, maybe became a bit too valuable for its own good.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning with the healing itself. The first couple of verses lay out the tradition. How does it work?
It's presented as very integrated into daily life. The ballad says the jars are found along the roads where farmers tread.
Suggesting they're common, accessible, not some rare hidden thing.
Precisely. And the method sounds incredibly simple. You take the wood, the Kothala Himbutu wood, make a jar or cup,
Okay,
fill it with water, and just leave it until dawn. The idea is the wood infuses the water with its, well, the ballad calls it healing magic.
drawing on nature, time, the wood's own chemistry.
Exactly. No complex extraction process described there.
And the ballad is specific about why people do this. It says, diabetics sip, their troubles fade. That's a pretty bold claim for a folk remedy.
It is. And this is where, we need to connect the poetry to the ground reality. Kothala Himbutu is the local name for Salacia reticulata.
Oh, okay. So it's a known plant species.
A very well-studied one, actually. Modern science has looked into it quite a bit, specifically for, guess what? Helping manage blood sugar levels.
No kidding. So the tradition actually lines up with scientific investigation.
It does. There's evidence it can help inhibit carbohydrate absorption, things like that. So when the ballad talks about diabetics, it's reflecting generations of observation and genuine efficacy.
Wow. So this isn't just superstition, it's accumulated knowledge.
Mhm.
The ballad emphasizes it was passed by elders, shared with care.
And that phrase, shared with care, is so important. It speaks to a communal ownership model, right? It's not patented, it's just known, shared.
Part of the local fabric.
Uh-huh.
The ballad calls it a miracle born of the Sri Lankan air, tying it to the place, the culture.
Yes, that localization is key. It's viewed as a birthright, intrinsic to that specific environment and community, not a product to be sold, initially anyway.
But that very local, effective knowledge,
Yeah.
that's what attracts outside interest, isn't it? This leads us into the conflict described in verse 3.
Yeah, here's the turning point. The tone shifts. The ballad introduces an external actor. A foreign hand came, clever and sly.
That wording, clever and sly, it's immediately casting judgment. It's not neutral observation.
Not at all. It frames the interaction as inherently exploitative from the community's perspective. This wasn't collaboration.
And what did this foreign hand do, according to the ballad?
It says they took the jar, the secret, and claimed it high. Appropriation.
Okay, took the secret is interesting. But the core action, the real grievance, seems to be about ownership of the source material itself.
Exactly. The ballad states they patented the plant, our treasure, our right. That's the lightning rod.
So let's break that down from an IP perspective.
Right.
What's the injustice here, specifically? How can you patent a plant that's been used for centuries?
Well, that's where it gets tricky, and frankly, where the system often fails traditional knowledge holders. Western patent law typically requires novelty and inventiveness.
Right. Something new.
But because the Sri Lankan community's knowledge was communal, passed down orally, maybe not written in scientific journals in a way the Patent Office recognizes.
It doesn't count as prior art in their system.
Often, no. Or it's difficult to prove. So the foreign entity could, say, isolate an active compound from the Kothala Himbutu, or perhaps refine a method of using it and claim that specific thing is novel.
Even though the fundamental knowledge of the plant's effect came directly from the community.
Precisely. They effectively take this deep, traditional understanding, maybe validate it with their own labs, and then use the patent system to claim ownership, often over the active components or even uses of the plant itself. It sort of erases the history.
So the system designed for, say, a new machine or a synthetic drug gets applied to a natural resource stewarded by a community for generations.
And that's the mismatch. IP law is generally built around individual or corporate invention, not communal, ancestral knowledge tied to biodiversity. Patenting Kothala Himbutu or its active elements transforms the shared cultural heritage,
Into a restricted product, something you have to pay for.
which is exactly what the ballad says. Now we must pay for what's ours by birthright. It sounds devastating, like the story ends there, with complete loss.
It does sound like defeat. But then the last verses, 4 and 5, they shift perspective again, don't they? It moves towards resilience.
Yes, it's a fascinating pivot. It acknowledges the legal reality, but contrasts it with the enduring local truth. The ballad says the jars still sit by the roadside green.
Meaning the practice continues, despite the patent.
It suggests exactly that. The daily ritual, the actual use of the jar and the water, didn't just stop because a piece of paper was filed somewhere else. The knowledge lives on in the community.
So if the patent exists, what power does the community actually retain? Is there any leverage left?
Well, potentially yes. Think about what's patented. Often it's the plant extract, maybe a specific compound, but the ballad emphasizes the whole process. The magic of the wood, the water, the dawn.
The ritual, the context.
Right, the how, the specific, perhaps subtle ways of preparing the wood, the timing, the cultural understanding around it. That holistic knowledge is much harder to capture in a patent.
Ah, so the know-how might still reside primarily with the community.
Exactly. The ballad says this knowledge lives in our hearts, it cannot be gone. That's not just poetry, it could be a practical reality. If the community holds back the full depth of the traditional preparation method, the patent on the raw material might be less valuable or harder to fully exploit.
So continuing the tradition becomes an act of defiance, in a way, asserting that the real value wasn't just the plant, but the knowledge system around it.
I think that's a fair reading. It's affirming that the cultural identity and the healing practice tied to the jar persist, regardless of who legally owns the plant internationally.
And the final lines really drive that home, calling the jar our gift, our star. Its power shines forever bright from the Sri Lankan hills.
It's a powerful claim of origin and enduring value. It says the true efficacy is linked to the tradition and the place, something a patent can't truly capture or extinguish.
Okay, so let's synthesize this. We follow this narrative thread from the ballad, a specific local healing practice using Kothala Himbutu for diabetes.
Then this intervention, this act of biopiracy, where existing IP laws are used to claim ownership over that traditional knowledge in the plant itself.
And finally, this expression of resilience, where the community asserts the survival of their cultural knowledge and practice, even in the face of that legal claim.
It's such a concise and potent illustration of how vulnerable traditional ecological knowledge is. You see clearly how systems geared towards industrial innovation can just roll over communal ownership.
Turning generations of stewardship into basically raw material for corporate development.
Yeah, it really highlights the inadequacies in how we value and protect different kinds of knowledge.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it? When
Yeah.
we talk about natural remedies gaining global interest, there's a risk of forgetting the original stewards, the cultures that maintain that knowledge, and the ecosystems.
Absolutely. Which leads us to a challenging question, maybe something for you, the listener, to think about. When a company patents something derived from traditional knowledge, like in this case, they're not just patenting a molecule. They're implicitly saying that the centuries of indigenous observation, cultivation, and stewardship didn't constitute invention, that it didn't really count until they documented it in a lab.
Right. It erases that history in a legal sense.
So the question becomes, should patent law continue to primarily reward this kind of discovery that builds on and sometimes erases ancestral knowledge? Or do we need to fundamentally rethink it to better recognize and perhaps compensate for that ecological and cultural debt? How do we balance innovation with fairness to the original keepers of that knowledge?
A very complex question, and one with huge implications globally. Something to definitely mull over. Thanks for unpacking that ballad with us.
Thank you. It's a powerful little story.